The Super Mini segment might be about little tiny cars, but it's about great big sales. It accounts for about 25% of UK car sales annually, which is a lot. And in that segment, Toyota account for about 2% of car sales annually, which is not a lot, but that's largely because they've been flogging the old Starlet, which is rubbish. The company's built a reputation more for producing very well constructed, if rather bland, large cars and some pretty handy sports cars. And then along comes this, the little Yaris, and it's something rather different. Make no bones about it, Toyota mean business in the European market with this. They've been crafty. They had it designed in Europe to appeal to our European eyes. And it's another high roof and low floor line concept. That means enormous doors, getting in and out is easy. Probably the only flaw for me in what is a very well resolved design outside is these oversized large headlamps. They look like somebody's used too much glue to stick them on. But there are some very nice design touches. I love the way this grille is beautifully integrated into the body and not just slapped on the front like on some. I also love the way that the creases and curves that define the shape are subtly executed. It's understated, unlike some in its class where the creases and curves there mean they will date inside of a year. And the same can be said for the interior, where it's definitely benefited from the touch of a designer's pen, and again a European designer. But there's nothing over the top. Everything is functional. The dash is defined by these two broad sweeping arches punctuated by these rather Flash Gordon air vents. Everything is neatly laid out, comes to hand and feels really quite robust. In order to make maximum use of the width of the cabin, Toyota have more or less done away with door bins. There's just a tiny little slim one. But you don't lose out on your storage space. This is so clever. There is space absolutely everywhere in what is a very clever cabin layout. But there's one big shock waiting for you as you settle behind the wheel. There's no clocks. They're here, and boy is this clever. The essential information for the driver and the console has been moved into the very centre and angled towards the driver, and the digital display that gives you miles an hour, revs, fuel and distance travelled has been designed to be three-dimensional. It doesn't need your eyes to refocus. You look away from the road and you look to the display, you look back again, there's less time taken, you don't have to refocus. It's very clever. Like a Formula One car takes to the track, a duck to water, and a footballer to recreational drugs, the little Yaris takes to the city streets as if it was born there. It's its natural habitat, its environment. Which means it comes with all the more of a surprise that the rear view visibility is dreadful. It's as a result of the shape of the car, and it means really for manoeuvring around the city it's pretty bad. But the plus side is that that shape results in a pretty commanding driving position. You are sitting quite high up, you have a commanding view of the road in front. You feel you're sitting in a car that's 4 or 5 times the size of this thing, which is quite a neat trick really. There's nothing exciting under the bonnet in terms of performance, but then you wouldn't expect it to be. It's a 1-litre 16-valve unit. Interestingly, from a technological point of view, it does have variable valve timing, which I suspect has been given more of a bias towards economy than performance. Again, that's only what you'd expect. If it gets a little bit twisty, on the odd occasion you take a car like this on the country roads, it performs reasonably well. It's certainly not as rolly and wallowy as the high centre of gravity appearance might imply, but that's because actually the centre of gravity isn't that high at all. A lot of work has obviously gone into keeping it fairly low down. Dynamically, it's not a bad package at all. The overwhelming impression in here is one of space and size. I can't emphasise that despite the diminutive looking interior, get in this thing and take it for a spin and you will be amazed. You feel like you've got into a people carrier, something as big as that. Now let's get to grips with just how much space there is in this thing. Bear in mind, it's a Super Mini. I'm not a tall guy, but I've had 6'2" mates sat in the back of this thing. No problem with headroom and no problem with room around you generally, which is pretty impressive. Also impressive is the boot space. Not as compromised as you might expect, considering the amount of cabin space you've got available, but it does get a little more clever than that. If that isn't enough space for you, the rear seats will go forwards, and if that isn't enough, we get the headrests off. 1, 2. It's a 60/40 fold rear seat, which gives you even more flexibility. And if that isn't enough, well then, I'd say that should be. There'll be 4 trim levels in the UK, familiar to those who already know their Toyotas. That means S, GS, GLS and CDX. Prices start at £7,495 on the road and rise to £10,995, and there's an interval of £1,000 between each of the trim levels, so you can probably work it out for yourself. There's an option of 3 or 5 door. It'll cost you an extra £500 for the extra 2 doors. The little Yaris is truly innovative. It's a new take on the idea of a city car. It offers a level of practicality that you will not find in a package this small. The looks might not be to everyone's taste, but I'd say they're certainly less radical than some out there, and there's very little about the car that is simply design for design's sake. With Toyota's reputation for building quality cars, there's no doubt that Yaris really will be as tough as it looks. There's an important factor to consider here. Over 90% of the sales of this car are expected to go to private buyers. In other words, it needs to appeal to real people rather than the corporate checkbooks. To do that, it has to be a bit special. In the super mini sector, we display a lot of brand loyalty. How many times do you hear people saying, "I've always had them and I always will, regardless"? To break through in that kind of market, it needs to do something a bit special, and I think it does. I think it is genuinely innovative in its approach to being a city car and the way it goes about doing it, without being radically different for the sake of being radically different, as in Ford's car. It wipes the floor, I think, with most of the opposition. It's very competitively priced. Probably its biggest opponent is Volkswagen's lovely Lupo, and if this can beat that, I think it's a winner.
The NEC near Birmingham, and the place is filled with Yarises, or should that be Yarai? It is the big dealer launch. At the end of the presentation, every dealer will get a car and they drive it back to their own dealership. This will be their first opportunity to see the new Toyota Yaris.
Well, the presentation I thought was very good today. It was very impressive. The product is a very good car and I think it'll sell very well. I think the Yaris has a whole new concept in small car design. Appealing in every way, from the value for money, the economy, the engine performance, the good looks of the vehicle, the sheer size of cabin space inside the vehicle is class leading. Basically class leading in every respect of the vehicle, you know.
What's special about the Yaris is it's class leading in everything you could possibly want out of a car. It's brand new. It's very good. There's everything on the car you could possibly want.
It'll be extremely good seller. It will not be following the rest. The pack will be following it. It's 7495 plus the economy and the room space of the vehicle and the dynamic looks. You can't style it to the Yaris. This vehicle is just something rather special. And if you look at other products, they take 50% of the model range of sales. It'll bring a lot more customers close to the Toyota family.
Toyota certainly are putting a lot behind the new Yaris. It certainly is light years away from the old Starlet, which was extremely lackluster and boring and not very good value, and it never sold well anyway. The Yaris is a completely new vehicle, and there are fresh hopes for its sales for the future. Suddenly it was drive-away time, and 300 Yarises sprung into life, and the logistical nightmare of getting all the dealers out of the NEC and back to their own dealerships began.
Now, although many of us have secret dreams of cruising in a convertible or owning a sleek supercar, the reality is very different. Because there, in big, bold letters at the top of our shopping list, are the words cheap, economical, practical. Dull words, but very important ones. And 3 words that Toyota had very much in mind when they designed their latest Super Mini, the Yaris.
Now, the Yaris is one of those cars that really does live up to its name. Yaris isn't the most conventional of names, and you'd be right in thinking that this isn't the most conservative of cars. It is in fact something of an oddity. It towers above most of its counterparts at a rather statuesque 59 inches. It might not be as long as its rivals, but it will still fit 4 adults comfortably inside. And now get ready for the biggest shock of all. This is a Japanese car, but it does appear to have been styled.
No, it may not exactly look high fashion, but I think it's cute. It comes in a great range of colours and it looks great on the road. And let's face it, it's certainly an enormous improvement on anything we've seen recently from Japan. And inside, yes, you get another very pleasant surprise. There's been styling going on in here as well. Gone is a traditional dashboard, replaced instead by a centre pod that houses a digital information display. Now, generally the whole interior does feel extremely solid and well built, but darlings, please, can somebody ban the use of grey plastic from the interiors of cars? I hate it. Apart from that though, I haven't got any more complaints. There are plenty of cubby holes and storage spaces everywhere. Just perfect for things like maps. Now, the first thing that you notice when you get behind the wheel is the very upright seating position. Now, it may not suit everybody, although I do quite like it. And the second thing you notice is the fact that there is nothing in front of you telling you how fast you're going. Now, it is all over there to the right in the instrument pod. It does seem a little bit strange looking over to the right, but you really do get used to it very quickly. The behind the wheel visibility is excellent. You get a great view of everything that's going on around you. And although this is a very small car, you feel really airy and open. You could very well be in something much bigger. Now, at the moment, the Yaris comes with just one engine. It's a 1 litre. It's got 67 brake horsepower and has a top speed of 96 miles per hour. Now, it's not the most powerful of engines, but particularly in the low gears, there is enough there for you. It's when you get up into 5th gear and you're hitting 70 that it does start to get very noisy. But let's be honest here, this isn't the kind of car that's going to really see a lot of action at the top end of the range now, is it? The gearbox on the Yaris is superb. It feels very sharp and the clutch is nice and smooth. And all this goes together to make the Yaris a really good car to drive around town in. This is where this car comes into its own. The steering is nice, it's got a good turning circle. There's power steering on everything but the most basic model. And because of the nice short body, it also makes it very easy to park. It really is a perfect city car.
Well, prices start at £7,495 on the road for the 3-door S model, and that rises to £10,995 for the 5-door CDX, which comes with things like alloy wheels, air conditioning and a CD radio as standard.
Okay, so what about economy? Well, the Yaris is actually a good all-round buy. All this 1 litre engine needs is a 10,000 mile health check. It only needs a full service every 20,000 miles or 2 years. And because of Toyota's price fixing policy, it means that should you need any parts, they're likely to be quite a bit cheaper than those of the competition. And did I mention, you should be getting up to 50 miles per gallon out of the Yaris. Not bad, eh?
Hey, you can't complain about 4 doors, plenty of space, 3 years warranty and 3 years free roadside rescue in case the unthinkable happens. And because this is a Toyota, there's really not much chance of that.
Now, I suppose some of us really are filthy rich and do spend our days sipping champagne whilst gazing at the exotic supercars parked on the driveway. But if for you the reality is 2 kids to get to school, shopping to be done at the supermarket, followed by a not so glamorous cup of tea, then the Toyota Yaris is the perfect car to have parked on your driveway.
Perfect? We don't often hear that word in a car report. Hang on a second, the Toyota Yaris may be good, but is it the right choice for you? After all, the Yaris only comes with a 1 litre engine. The Nissan Micra, for example, has a choice of 1 and a 1.3 for extra oomph. The Micra was also the best-selling 1 litre car by far last year, and the Nissan Micra Profile, which replaces their Equation model, offers a 3-door car standard power steering for $7,995, which is $500 less than the Yaris GS. Both cars come with a 3-year warranty. And what about the cute and sturdy VW Lupo or the award-winning Ford Fiesta? We'll check out some of the Yaris's rivals after the break. In part 1, we focused on the latest contender to the super mini market, the revolutionary Toyota Yaris. But what other choices are there for the same sort of money? The main drawback under the bonnet of the Yaris is the choice of engine. There's either the 1 litre or the 1 litre. The Ford Fiesta may be a little long in the tooth, but it offers a well-proven 1.3 power plant, which, although it delivers slightly less power than the Yaris, is far more refined, especially at motorway speeds. The larger engine, of course, won't take advantage of the Chancellor's lower road tax. You also may prefer to invest in proven established technology that the Ford offers, and any car mechanic worth their salt can service and fix a Fiesta. Then there's the tweaked Vauxhall Corsa. The team at Lotus have helped to give this Super Mini a few better driving manners, and the Corsa is pretty spacious inside. However, you may find the 1 litre Corsa underpowered when you've got a full load. Or how about the Fiat Seicento? A tiny 900cc engine powers this tiny town car, but at $6.5 it's stylish and pretty good value. But the Toyota Yaris has 2 main rivals in its class, the solid VW Lupo and last year's best-selling Super Mini, Sunderland's famous son, the Nissan Micra.
Okay, let's just say I didn't make any plans to go cruising or posing in the Micra, all right? I mean, image-wise, for me, the Micra generally rests somewhere between tartan slippers and sweaters with animals on them. Personally, I've never really had the slightest interest in how well they actually go or stop, and that's for 2 simple reasons. Number 1, I wouldn't be found dead in one, and number 2, they're only ever driven by old people with straw hats and golf umbrellas velcroed onto the parcel shelf. But this one, I think, really is cute. It's the nose, it's sort of wrinkled. The nostrils, they're kind of a bit flary, really. It's cute, but not in a stuffed koala or some cloying, bug-eyed cartoon character kind of way. It's more like the cuteness of a puppy when it growls at you. It's got just a little bit of attitude. Nissan's designers have taken the previous Bambi look of the last Micra and they've armed it with a pop gun and a snarl. Now that, to me, really is cute. The seats are comfortable. They're a bit firm, but not uncomfortable. There's only one problem, and that's with the driving position. There's no adjustment at all on the height of the driver's seat, and the adjustment of the steering wheel is very minimal and just for height, which means the very, very small people are going to have a bit of trouble getting very comfortable in here, which is quite ironic, really, in what is, after all, a very small car. The version before this version of the Micra, if you remember the sort of squared-off biscuit tin one, was so ghastly that subsequent generations of the car must have wondered how they could ever overcome the dreadfulness of their forebears. In fact, a couple of years or so ago, the newly redesigned Micra must have tripped merrily into the limelight, all cutesy curves and cheeky looks, only to discover that most of us were still reeling from the shock of their ancestors' tatty, shabby, tinny nastiness. And anyway, I didn't actually like the last car in its own right, even without its embarrassing family history. For me, it was just too cute, too cuddly, too noddy. For what is, after all, very much a city car, once you're out on the open road, it behaves itself reasonably well. The steering's actually quite sharp, but the brakes are a bit numb. They do let it down, and I must say that through the bends there is quite a lot of body roll. That's only if you push it, and I suppose who's ever going to be too cruel to such a little cutie? It wouldn't be right. It also can start to feel a little bit cramped in the cabin, particularly when you think about what it's up against, the likes of Renault's Clio and a Volkswagen's Polo. And after a while, particularly in town, you do start to feel a little bit perched, a little bit on display. It all becomes, well, frankly, rather worryingly noddyland.
Beautiful shores of Lake Geneva and Volkswagen's new small car, the Lupo. Why do they need a small car? After all, they've got the Polo. Well, the answer is, over the years, Polo has grown into one of the biggest super minis. It's almost the same length and weight as the original Mark I Golf. So Volkswagen say there's room for a new small car contender. Now, while Lupo is small, in interior space in the front and passenger side at least, it's very generous. Volkswagen claim that this area is the same size as their Volkswagen Polo, and in the press release they say that's the same size as a medium saloon car. Not quite sure about that statement, and there isn't an awful lot of elbow room on my side, that's for sure. But very generous headroom and lots of leg and hip room, certainly in this car. Comfortable supportive seats for a small car in this price range, and with the Swiss insistence that you stick to their very tight speed limits, and we're told radar traps everywhere, not a huge opportunity to exploit the performance and handling, but certainly cruising round Lake Geneva seems perfectly adequate. This is the 1.4 litre 75 brake horsepower engine. Nice 5-speed gearbox, typically Volkswagen in the way it performs as well. Although it does gulp somewhat on the auto route when you engage the optional air conditioning. If you like the rather extreme colour of this particular car, then you won't mind all these areas of painted metal inside. Personally, I think I'd prefer it if they were properly trimmed. The chassis engineers have paid a lot of attention to ride comfort in this car, and it doesn't pitch and jolt as so many ultra small cars tend to do. In fact, the ride in the back is quite smooth, even if there isn't very much in the way of legroom. Lupo shares its cheeky styling with Seat's Arosa, already on sale in the UK. Different front end, and another major difference, Volkswagen say this car has a fully galvanised body shell guaranteed against corrosion for 12 years. Why this car should have that guarantee and the Arosa doesn't is anybody's guess. This is the 1 litre 54 brake horsepower version of the car, and it'll form the entry-level model in the UK. Understandably less lively than the 1.4 litre big brother, but nonetheless very lively around town. And although it's going to be the base version, still well equipped. Decent electric windows, good seats, twin airbags, passenger and driver, and head restraints for all 5 occupants. And despite it being the 1 litre version, it's very smooth and refined at motorway speed. Now I know Jeremy Clarkson always rubbishes diesels, but in this particular installation, you have to say it makes an awful lot of sense. 70 miles an hour on the auto route, and the diesel version of Lupo is definitely not as smooth and quiet as either the 1 litre or the 1.4. Nevertheless, it's got a maximum speed of 97 miles an hour, so it's not short on performance, and it's capable of delivering in this lightweight body 78 miles to the gallon. So that puts the petrol cars firmly in their place.